We're gonna have a look at the J.J. Abrams video then, because it's on the similar line of thought with what we were just looking at, I feel like, with the approaches to critical thinking and mystery box and that. This is by Literature Devil.
This is your story. This is your story on Mystery Box. Friends don't let friends use Mystery Box.
This PSA brought to you by Channel Merchandise and Dr. Alpha Miracle Child on Indiegogo. Links down below.
Okay.
J.J. Abrams' Mystery Box theory has garnered quite the infamous reputation in a post-Disney Star Wars world, and with good reason. However, this of course was not always the case. In the long, long ago, before the dark times, i.e. before the advent of the Disney Star Wars sequels, at least some people thought the mystery of the mysterious Mystery Box theory sounded impressive. At least impressive enough for a TED Talk. A real one. It didn't have to wait until the cringy roster of bumbling buffoonery of the TEDx series to make its debut. So,
I haven't watched that, but so hopefully it's gonna sum it up.
So, in other words, the Mystery Box topic was deemed hot enough for the cheer squad instead of being relegated to the pep squad. And the presentation seemed to have garnered a positive reception, even maintaining a strongly positive like-to-dislike ratio 12 years down the line. But what exactly is the Mystery Box theory, and why exactly has it earned such a nasty reputation? Because the truth is that while Abrams' Mystery Box is technically somewhat effective, the theory is overall incomplete. While the talk itself is about 18 minutes and dwindles from his initial point, veering off into a strange rant about special effects and leading him to conclude his presentation with the conclusion of a different presentation, the heart of the Mystery Box theory is, to quote Abrams, "I find myself drawn to infinite possibility, that sense of potential, and I realize that mystery is the catalyst for imagination. When I started to think that maybe there are times when mystery is more important than knowledge, I started getting interested in this. To summarize, mystery sparks the imagination, and sometimes what we can imagine is far more important and exciting than the truth." And
I get that.
this part is true. To put it simply, Abrams' Mystery Box is a storytelling formula that centers on suspense. As Abrams put it, mystery is indeed the catalyst for imagination. For example, the theory itself gets its name from a Tanny's Mystery Magic Box, $15 for $50 worth of magic, a box which JJ never opened. To Abrams, the sheer excitement he felt from simply indulging his imagination in the infinite possibilities of the box's contents was far more important than the actual contents of the box. And
okay. Interesting. We'll see where he goes with this.
that is the essence of the theory, asking the question and focusing on the joy of not knowing rather than the joy of knowing. On its own,
on its own, that's good, and in certain circumstances, that's really good. Like, that's a very creative mindset to go, I'd rather imagine the possibilities rather than know the answer. But ultimately, there is still X amount of things inside the box, isn't there? There's still things that are going on in the writing. You eventually have to answer some of the mysteries, and it will, in a way, not be what you imagined. And if you don't answer them, you're leaving the whole thing unresolved.
the idea of the Mystery Box theory has worked, and with great effect, and not only in well-constructed creative works, but iconic pieces of American pop culture. One significant example might be the briefcase from Pulp Fiction. In the movie, the case is considered important. Whatever is inside holds a lot of value. So valuable that our anti-heroes for the evening, Vincent and Jules, shoot up an apartment full of criminals.
He's got such a white background that's mucking up my green screen.
Who decided the briefcase was valuable enough that they attempted to steal the case from Marcellus Wallace, one of the most dangerous and influential crime bosses in the city. And even though the case is valuable, and even though it's what these criminals tried to steal, and why Jules and Vincent are there at all, even though whatever's in that case is central to the events of the opening event of Pulp Fiction, we never find out the contents. And dwelling on the infinite possibilities the case represents has indeed sparked the imagination of the fans.
But also, it leads to the conclusion that the contents aren't important, it's just that it was valuable.
theorizing answers from money to Marcellus Wallace's soul. We see this idea play out again in V for Vendetta. V, the rambunctious revolutionary, plays the central role in lighting the spark of revolt amongst the people being oppressed by a fascist British government. Yet, all throughout, V wears a mask, and beneath the mask is a face we never get to see, and an identity we never get to learn. While we do get a few hints to V's backstory where his identity is concerned, all we're left with is a mystery, an infinite possibility of who exactly is behind the mask. And
it's the same thing. It doesn't matter who is behind the mask. And it doesn't matter if the person changes us behind the mask. There's also examples of stories where the mask is just symbolic and other people take on the same persona wearing the mask and carry on the same thing. If the person that is V died, then there will be another V. There will be someone. I'll probably need to watch V for Vendetta. But yes, that's the idea. Is that there's always going to be infinite possibility about who it could be, but ultimately finding out doesn't matter. Viva for gender.
Again, the audience will likely gain far more enjoyment from theorizing concrete aspects to V, who he was and how he became the mysterious masked man, than learning the truth, because
this is the draw of murder mysteries, right? Where you don't know who the killer is at the start. I think that's why I've enjoyed murder mysteries like that anyway. Where you have to, as you're watching it, for example, an episode of Pyro, you're watching it and trying to figure out yourself who the killer would be as you're going, and that's part of the fun of the mystery. But then ultimately it gets resolved and it's explained how it is, and you feel satisfied if you've worked it out properly. But the point of those stories is that it is important who it is, compared to something like this where it doesn't matter.
As again, no answer the story could have given could possibly ever live up to the answers we ourselves carved into the strong, sturdy marble of infinite possibility. So it's
some things I didn't see coming, some things I did. Some things are pretty obvious from the start, like red, white, and that sort of thing.
Easy to see where Abrams is coming from, mainly because we can see the idea.
The speculation's part of the fun, though. Like, I can see where Abrams comes from. Like, the speculation and the possibilities are part of the fun along the journey.
Thrive in works that have grounded themselves as icons of American pop culture. However, the reason why the Mystery Box and the way it's presented by J.J. Abrams is so fundamentally flawed is because it's at best incomplete and at worst misguided. The fact is that the Mystery Box theory is a pleasant poison, a paralytic, and almost childlike delight, obsessing over what could be without ever having to face what is, diving deep into the euphoric high of infinite possibility. And the high is a thrilling one, keeping our hearts pumping and our minds racing as Abrams presents us with question after question, and the crash hits hard when the answer never arrives. Because
that's the problem when you're writing something of a story like that, is you need to have an answer to the important things. Is it lagging a little bit? It says I am dropping frames a bit. Can I limit the network to something on this tab? Yes. Let's try that. Let's see if that improves it. This does say it was dropping some frames. Like 0.1%.
if we take the movie that reignited interest in Abrams' infamous TED Talk, The Force Awakens, as a suitable example of witnessing the mystery box in play, then its major flaw is a critical misplacement of narrative focus.
See, my problem is that by now, I don't care enough about The Force Awakens to remember what the mystery box thing was.
To focus, as used here, essentially answers the question, what is this story about? While the Pulp Fiction briefcase may have been the reason why Vincent and Jules murdered a room full of people, the narrative focus actually isn't on the contents of the case. Instead, the answer to what is the story of Vincent and Jules about is the enlightenment of Jules. As I mentioned,
Who is? And nobody cares. But then you're right. The question being who is Ray, he had to answer that in the sequel movie. And then it was the answer to it is nowhere near as good as what you imagine it could be. And rather, the way he would do it, I would do like these other movies, like, it doesn't matter who it is. It matters what she does now. No, wasn't it in The Rise of Skywalker that they said she was Rey Skywalker, Rey Palpatine or whatever? But that also doesn't help when there's no plan.
Vincent and Jules arrive at an apartment to bring back a briefcase that contains something Marcellus Wallace really wants. They end up getting it and shooting up almost everyone involved, but what I didn't mention was that they'd missed one thief who had been hiding away. The hidden thief steps out with a gun, fires off 6 shots.
Because I'm just trying to put the two J.J. Abrams movies together, because that was his writing compared to the person that wasn't his writing, that's all.
And misses every single one. And he misses despite the near certainty that he shouldn't have. Jules interprets this outcome as divine intervention, and it's this miraculous event that shocks him into his sudden change of mind. So yes, Vincent and Jules are there to retrieve the briefcase, and yes, they kill everyone in the room and eventually shoot Marvin in the face. But the core of the story is not about two gangsters violently retrieving a valuable MacGuffin for their boss, but a story of a gangster who spent years callously committing one horrific crime after another and using religion as a plaything, to a man who willingly turns from a path of crime to become a righteous man. The contents of the briefcase itself is ultimately unimportant. What is important is that we know that the contents are important. Had the contents actually been the narrative focus, then whatever was inside would have been the catalyst.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying.
So then the briefcase would play a similar role to the plutonium in Expendables 2, something uniquely valuable that motivates the antagonist, and the identity of the contents will dictate the motivations of said antagonists, and the consequences the protagonists will face by fighting back. And so the nature of the contents will drive the actions of the protagonists. For example, if the contents were loot from a heist gone wrong, maybe the diamonds from Reservoir Dogs, the antagonists might be rival gangsters, thieves, and assassins who want the diamonds for themselves. And so Vincent and Jules might have to survive not knowing who to trust. Since being criminals themselves, they likely couldn't go to the police. And being criminals themselves, any safe houses, underworld traders, and other associates might turn on them for either a better deal from a rival gang boss or for a chance of taking the diamonds for themselves. On the other hand, if the nature of the briefcase was far more sinister, maybe a suitcase nuke, then the antagonists might be the government itself, and Vincent and Jules would be looking down the barrel of the United States government. They'd be outcast, all alone, and facing far worse consequences than prison time. Or if the case actually did contain the soul of Marcellus Wallace, the following tale might be one of Vincent and Jules having to outsmart the devil himself. A gangster pulls off a seemingly typical job, but when something unexpected happens, he soon abandons a life of crime for spiritual enlightenment. Two gangsters steal back a briefcase for their boss, but when every criminal in the city starts chasing them down, they learn this was no ordinary score. Two gangsters take back a stolen case for their boss, but when they learn the nature of its contents, they find themselves facing down the United States government. Two gangsters retrieve a stolen briefcase for their boss, but when they learn what's inside, the only way out is to outwit the devil himself.
Yeah, the different log lines give it a very different twist.
Since the narrative focus would shift from Jules to what's inside the briefcase, in each scenario the heart of the story would change depending on the contents. The identity of V is in the same position. The narrative focus for V for Vendetta is actually on the idea V as a character represents, the spirit of revolution. But more importantly, the mystery of his identity speaks to the heart of the message. In the face of tyranny, anyone can rise to challenge it, just like Evie did when she disguised herself as V at the end of the comic in order to lead England's people on Revolution Night. And just as
exactly the example of me saying, look, it wouldn't matter who V is, it's what they represent.
As movie Evie points out, V was everyone, a symbol of revolution itself. But had the narrative focus shifted to the identity of V, then the story would switch from the idea of revolution to the story of V himself. Even if the story played out from Evie's perspective, V's identity would play a central element to the overall story. A switch from a story about the spirit of revolution to a story about the man who led the revolution. Change from a story showing us that anyone can be a hero to a story showing us the personal journey of a specific designated hero. A tale about anyone versus the tale about one In both instances, the contents of the briefcase and the identity of V are acceptable mysteries because, while intriguing, the answers to these mysteries are ultimately unimportant to the resolution of the plot. And this is where the mystery box breaks down. Looking back at The Force Awakens, the story sparked one main question from the audience, one that seemed to be the product of Abrams' mystery box. Who are Rey's parents? Keep in mind that the narrative focus is on Rey's identity. She's a blank slate. No past, no heritage, no friends. Just a lone person on a lone desert planet. And she stays alone by choice, waiting for the return of her parents. Parents who...
When was this? 4 years ago. 2021.
She can...
This is... I need to just double check a date. It was so this was after the sequel trilogy was finished. Alright.
Barely remember, all for the sake of learning who she is. Even defenders of the Star Wars sequels will mistakenly say that Rey's biggest flaw is a yearning for this identity. In true mystery box fashion, Abrams asks the question and never answers it. But here's the difference between the Pulp Fiction briefcase, the identity of V, and the question of Rey's identity. Rey's bloodline could have remained a satisfactory mystery and sparked the imagination of enthusiastic fans to no ill effect. That is, had Rey been treated like Luke Skywalker had been treated. Because the goal...
So, that's unlocking memories that I'm like, oh, great. Something that would have worked for that is what Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi, where at the end of it, it seemed like the possibility that anyone could be a Jedi, like they had some kids playing and that was using the Force or something. That kind of thing. Was that in that one? Or am I mixing it up? I don't know. I don't care enough to correct myself. Either way, that is part of, like, this could have remained a satisfactory mystery, and that was the outcome of, like, anyone can rise to greatness just like Luke Skywalker.
Golden rule of Star Wars, the one that had been carved into the heart of the franchise from the very beginning, that even the most gifted of Force users require training to learn more advanced techniques and grow their power, had been broken. So when we see Rey breaking this golden rule and begin dominating minds, out-Force pulling Kylo Ren, another Force user who actually had training and is supposedly as naturally gifted as she is, and then soon after defeating him in a lightsaber battle despite her severe inexperience, especially when compared to Kylo Ren's comparatively considerable experience. And all without even the slightest hint of training, the question presented by Abrams' mystery box shifts from thrilling lore to a narrative focus. Because Rey has so many skills and is such a natural with the Force that she instinctively taps into powers and techniques far above her experience level, she's clearly different from every other Force user we've seen in the films. So when they make Rey's identity so mysterious and make discovering that identity Rey's only real identifiable motivation, it's natural for the audience to suspect that the reason why Rey is so powerful and so significantly different lies somewhere in her bloodline. But Abrams doesn't answer or even hint at an answer to that question, and without either, Rey's overpowered Little Miss fanfiction nature goes without explanation.
But that is the thing of, like, it was planned to have more movies after it. I don't know if he's gonna mention that. But it looks like he might later. But taking The Force Awakens as itself does leave that a lot. And that's, I guess, where Fringe is ramped up a bit too. With this is so important, and you've left it as a cliffhanger on the season finale. When you see how he's answered this, is there going to be a satisfying answer to what's going on in Fringe? Because we're watching Fringe on a bit as we go. We just finished season 3 the other night? Last night? Was it Wednesday? Yeah, last night. Well, it would have been Tuesday night. And so it's like, well, you've built up all this mystery, and when you build up so much mystery, you need a satisfying explanation as well, not just a, oh yeah, that's that.
John Wick's legendary skill is acceptable without specific explanation because of his age and the respect he's earned over a long career. This, combined with his level of knowledge and the efficiency he displays in his profession, specifying the exact weapons he'll need for a job and knowing exactly how to take on any situation, no matter how impossible, allows the audience to assume that he's been through training and has taken the pains to earn his place as a living legend.
And the movie supports that in John Wick because it builds up his reputation, and it does explain, oh look, he's had this training and all that.
Situation would be like giving a teenage boy all of John Wick's skills and expertise. And so the next question would be, how did such a young boy attain the skill level and the same knowledge as John Wick? The answer becomes necessary because the narrative focus would center on who this teenager is and how he gained such skill level at a young age. In both the case of Ray and this hypothetical teenage assassin, the only remaining answer would be that they're just awesome, which means both would likely be Mary Sue's. To put it another way, if your best friend suddenly stole your car without explanation, the question you would be asking, and therefore the narrative focus would be, why did your best friend just steal your car? Because in most relationships, a best friend suddenly stealing another friend's car would be unusual. More or less as unusual as a teenager having the equivalent skill level of John Wick, and as unusual as Ray having such a long roster of skills and such a uniquely strong connection with the Force. After all, the story of a teenage assassin would play out differently if his skill set was amateur and unpolished, as opposed to a John Wickian degree of sharpness. And the story of Force Awakens would have been unrecognizable if Ray hadn't been gifted the answers to every obstacle she came across. She wouldn't have been able to magically fix the Millennium Falcon despite her lack of experience with such an old ship. She wouldn't have been able to suddenly attain knowledge on how to dominate brains, so her guard wouldn't have been able to free her. And she wouldn't have been able to overpower Kylo Ren, who was a fellow Force user, supposedly as naturally gifted as she was, only trained, all of which would have resulted in a drastically different ending, and possibly Rey suffering a very bitter defeat.
Mary Sue can work with particular types of stories. And then I think if you give he's having the example of John Wick. And what he's trying to drive the point of is that if you have a Mary Sue in a movie, the narrative focus does become how they become so good, because that question hangs in the air. And there needs to be some sort of explanation for it. To have a compelling character, anyway. Right. But even superheroes have origin stories. And reasons why they are the way that they are. Superman's an alien. He's powered up by the different sun, and he was raised by good people that gave him his moral basis. Because he survives everything as a thing, but yeah. That ends up giving him a basis, as he's saying about with this, for why he is the way he is. And yeah. I'm just thinking of Superman in general more than just Injustice.
The major flaw of the Mystery Box is that it relies on the excitement of mystery to thrill the audience, and disregards the importance of the final answer to these mysteries, even when the answers to these mysteries become critical to the plot's function. The Mystery Box is incomplete because it's juvenile, dwelling on what could be without ever having to face what is, presenting endless questions without ever presenting the one anointed answer. That obsession with infinite possibility is a drug, a pleasant paralytic. It's the same obsession that has kept countless people dreaming about becoming writers instead of actually becoming writers. Because dwelling on the fantasy of infinite possibility about how your big novel will turn out and how much it will shake the world is far more scrumptious a thought than facing the reality. The reality that one's work will never be perfect, and the very real possibility that it will be met with resounding indifference. So, if the Mystery Box is truly incomplete, what would a functioning version look like? The more refined version of J.J. Abrams' Mystery Box theory is what I like to call Lee Child's cake formula. Lee Child is the creator.
Okay, I've read a couple of Lee Child books. It's been a while, though.
Creator and writer of the highly successful Jack Reacher thriller series, which currently has 24 installments and still going strong. The series has built its success on gripping, heart-pounding suspense. So how might the Mystery Box look under a master of suspense? And what exactly is the cake formula. Lee Child explains his exact formula for suspense in an interview published in the New York Times. To quote, "How do you bake a cake? Has the wrong structure. It's too indirect. The right structure and the right question is, how do you make your family hungry? And the answer is, you make them wait 4 hours for dinner."
Yes, starve them.
The full context is a comparison is being made between writing a book and baking a cake. Just as chefs are always asking how to bake a better cake, searching for better ingredients and how much of each ingredient to include, writers often ask how to make a story more suspenseful, how to keep your reader on the edge of their seat and burning through page after page. And so Lee Child says that instead of concentrating on baking a better cake, one should concentrate on making your reader hungrier. Lee Child's technique taps into the same strategy as Abrams' Mystery Box, to ask a question and let the audience indulge themselves with the infinite possibility of the final answer. But where it differs is that it actually completes. Where J.J. Abrams chooses to ask intriguing questions important to the plot and then never answer them, Lee Child chooses to ask intriguing questions important to the plot and then build that suspense by keeping the reader waiting until he finally answers the question. But the question is eventually answered. Why? Because he knows the answers to these questions are critical to the plot's function.
Yeah, exactly.
And that failing to address them would severely damage his story. In other words, Lee Child might keep his family waiting 4 hours for dinner, but dinner is eventually served, while Abrams is content promising dinner and then serving nothing and hoping his family will be satisfied with the infinite possibilities of what dinner could have been. In the end, a plot running on the mystery box is like a car trying to run without an engine. And that's why, even before the days of The Last Jedi and the rise of Skywalker, the argument, it doesn't matter who Rey is because the message is supposed to be, just like V for Vendetta, that anyone can be a hero, ultimately fails. Because V's identity was unimportant. It was never made a narrative focus. All of V's skills and abilities were explained through scientific experimentation rather than social position or bloodline. As the wiki puts it, the experiments actually yield some beneficial results. He develops Olympic-level reflexes, increased strength, and incredibly expanded mental capacity, as demonstrated consistently throughout the novel. And therefore, the plot never relied on V's identity to function. Because Abrams built the mystery of his mystery box on the identity of Rey, and then proceeded to make her so unusual, even within the context of Star Wars, that her existence required justification. A reason why Rey was not only a Jedi, not only powerful in the Force, but prodigious, even for a prodigy. But because the mystery box is a drug, and its baseline is essentially the storytelling equivalent of heroin, the answer is never even hinted at over the course of The Force Awakens. And unlike Lee Child's cake formula, it asks a question, but never gives any indication or attempt at an answer. No clear moment linking Rey to a powerful Force user, no hint that she might be a successfully created clone, nothing. So while the mystery box is built on some techniques that are both interesting and have proven to be successful, when used on major essential elements of a story's plot, it becomes toxic. It can outright destroy an entire trilogy from movie 1. And the final result is the audience discovering that the mystery box is a Pandora's box of writing, and what's really, truly waiting inside is not wonder, but poison, and that Abrams' theory, in reality, is nothing but a misery box.
No, that was a good video. I had never really seen how he's talked about his theory in that. Yeah. There's a lot of stories that do mysteries well, and it's a shame when they don't.